This episode of Dorking Out is brought to you by Stark Industries, changing the world for a better future.
And the letter A, because you can't spell autoplay without A. Hey, websites that autoplay ads, you can go to hell. You are worse than Hitler.
Except for our podcast autoplayer. It's great.
Houston, flight is go.
Mila, let's go. SPM. Safety contact.
From Assignment X, Amalgamated Storytelling, and thesoniashow.com, it's The Dorking Out Show with Christopher Allen Smith and Sonia Mansfield.
Welcome to episode 71 of Dorking Out, a podcast for people who like to dork out about stories and the stories in pop culture that we love. That means movies and TV, books and podcasts, and everywhere else we find stories that interest us. This is the Thor Has Seen Stranger Things and Star Trek Discovery Edition. With me today is my co-host, Emmy Award-winning filmmaker and nerd author, Christopher Allen Smith.
Hey there!
Hello!
And with me today is my co-host, professional writer and author of The Sonia Show, a blog chronicling her eternal love for the Republican Party, Sonia Mansfield.
Ew!
I gotcha! You're so easy! Your buttons are right there on the surface. All right. In this week's episode,
Time to start over.
we talk about the blonde-headed stepchild of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Thor, and review the third movie in that series, Thor Ragnarok. Is this the best movie of the MCU, or is it another Dark World? Which, for my money, was still pretty good.
Oh, you're burnt, Thor.
Which is, I like Dark World. I don't know what everybody's talking about. Anyway, point is, joining us today to talk about that is Peter Brown, associate editor of Assignment X. Then we welcome podcasting virgin Albert AJ Muller, writer for the Daily Grindhouse and Horrorview, to talk about Netflix's most recent juggernaut, Stranger Things 2: The Strangening.
I wish they had called it that.
I may have added a little bit to that title. Then we welcome Jeff Bond to talk about Star Trek Discovery, Episode 8. We have a lot to dork out about, so let's get this ball rolling. That brings us to topic one, our review of Thor Ragnarok and our quarterly examination of,
really is.
Of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Pretty soon it's going to be monthly and then weekly, and then maybe at that point I will get sick, but I don't think so. Anyway, Thor Ragnarok is the third movie in Marvel's Thor series and the 17th movie in the overall Marvel Cinematic Universe. It came out Friday. As Marvel is starting to release these comic book epics on a nearly quarterly clip, Guardians of the Galaxy 2 came out 6 months ago. Spiderman Homecoming came out just 4 months ago. Black Panther's coming out 3 months from now. We will dispense with the usual what's going on with the Marvel Cinematic Universe discussion, because we've said it and we're going to have another chance here in a couple weeks to say it again. Rejoining us is best friend of the show, Peter Brown.
Oh, he's the best friend, BFF of the show.
That's right.
Oh, my heart just grew 3 sizes.
The associate editor of Assignment X and one of our favorite comic book movie thinkers, Peter Brown.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Peter.
Wow, I am amazed that I got such praise from you, Smith. But
That's
okay,
right.
thank
No,
you.
you
I'll
got
take
it.
it.
So here is the first question to get the ball rolling. Peter, what has been your opinion of the previous Thor movies, and how do you feel about Thor Ragnarok, directed by genre favorite Taika Waititi?
He is one of my favorites, actually.
I'm glad you tried to pronounce it. So I'm glad you asked that question, actually, because I actually recently watched the first Thor movie. I think it was on cable, like FX or something. and I noticed that it was severely lacking in the, I guess, like what I like to say, the go-to Marvel kind of way of making these movies that they've kind of adapted to, which is lots and lots of like humor and like tension-breaking moments. The original Thor doesn't have nearly as many as like say Thor Ragnarok or any of the other movies that have come, like Guardians of the Galaxy. So it's interesting to see like the original movie, because it is more of a straight superhero movie without any kind of comedy at all. Much the same way that the first Captain America was, and like I actually recently watched the Incredible Hulk too, and it's the exact same way. There's little humor at all in there. So it's interesting when you come to Thor Ragnarok, which is like filled with it. It's filled with like comedic moments and lots of levity. Not that that's a bad thing. I'm just pointing out the difference. And then the second movie, what's it called? The Dark World or whatever?
That's right.
Thor, the Dark
Tower.
World. The Dark Tower.
It should have been called the Dark Tower, because that's how bad it was. So yeah, I didn't.
Holy smokes! I'm sorry, Peter. I'm gonna have to stop you right there. Have you seen the Dark Tower? I don't think you would be saying that if you saw the Dark Tower.
Okay, maybe that's
we took a hit.
Yes.
And saw.
Perhaps we should have had you on the show to make you watch it.
So bad.
All right, so maybe that's going a little too far, but that is definitely I am very much in agreement with Rotten Tomatoes and everybody else who thinks that is the weakest one of the bunch, by far. But this one I like the best of the three, by far. It's the most enjoyable. They seem to have their act together. It's kind of another mini Avengers one, which they've been doing a lot of lately. So I liked that. I thought it was really good. It had a lot of good moments, a lot of action. A lot of things that are going to carry over, I think, into other movies. So yeah, it was very enjoyable. I definitely like this one the best of the three.
Sonia,
Yes.
What is your opinion? Well, actually, yeah. Now that I think about it, have you seen the other movies? Are you into Thor? Or?
So I saw the first Thor and remember thinking it was better than I thought it was going to be. Like, it was an enjoyable movie that I quickly forgot that I even saw. But I thought Chris Hemsworth was like it. Like, I was like, he looks like he could be a god. Like, he is a movie star. He's like such a movie star to me. And I liked him so much that I didn't bother to see Dark World. And, and I saw this one. This one I like a lot more. But do you know what my chief complaint is going to be, Smith?
It's too funny.
It's too long. This movie is too long.
Wow. Interesting.
2 hours and 10 minutes. It is too long. This movie needed to be like 20 minutes shorter.
All right. Interesting.
But, and it would have just made the movie really tight and like, I think like move faster and feel more fun. But I do really like this one. It is easily my favorite of the two that I've seen now. And it felt like it's very inspired by the Guardians of the Galaxy to me.
Right.
Like I love the characters and I love their interaction. I think that's the best part of the movie. And that's kind of my favorite things about the Guardian movies too. Yeah. Is that interaction. And, and I just super love the look of this movie. This movie was like the way it looks is like it was made for me. Like it looks like a 70s, 80s rock album cover like all the time. I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was really fun.
Complete with the soundtrack. That also kind of follows it. Yeah. They did a good job of making it Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Definitely.
Yes.
With all the different crazy characters and all the off-world kind of stuff and all the things that we haven't seen in any of the other two movies. So I agree with there.
They hired, a really good director who did What We Do in the Shadows, which is so funny. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. It's super funny.
I will definitely be seeing it now. I have not seen it. My cousin's been telling me relentlessly to see it.
It's really, really, really funny. You
I
need
will
to see it.
definitely. I'll be running to see it now.
But it's got that like he's from New Zealand, right? The
Yes.
director.
Yeah.
So it has that like kind of like awkward, like deadpan humor that like Flight of the Conchords have. It's really funny. And I really liked Hunt for the Wilder People too. I think that came out last year. So I love that I like that I feel like who directed the second Thor, which I didn't even see.
I believe it was Alan Taylor who made a big splash with a lot of his episodes of Game of Thrones. So he took over. Patty Jenkins was actually supposed to direct Thor,
right? And
too. Then she left for reasons unknown. He came in. Supposedly, Thor: The Dark World had a lot of problems that they kind of had to fix and do a bunch of reshoots. I
like that they hired someone with a vision and a voice to direct this movie, as opposed kind of like what they're doing now with the Star Wars movies. Like they're bringing on like really good directors to lead those, and I like that they did that for Thor. Like it's not just some hired gun.
Well, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how.
Like Kenneth Branagh directed the first one.
Yeah.
And, no swipe at him. I like him, but like, you don't really know what his voice is. He doesn't have like a style to him.
Right.
Yeah, and they didn't. It's just not a throwaway. It's not like, oh, we have to do another Thor movie to keep kind of everything moving along. So we're just gonna throw some random director in there and he'll put together whatever. No, they actually put some effort into it, which shows in the movie.
Yeah, and I think they gave him some leeway to make it his own, because it does look so great. And I mean, sometimes it's a little video gamey, but I think that's okay. And I think the comedy in it is really funny. Like it's very slapsticky. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
it's a fun movie. I took my husband went with me, and he really liked it too.
Okay.
And we don't always agree on that.
So let me ask you this, because I really did like this movie a lot, but I kind of felt my head hitting against the, I don't know, almost like there's a very rigid Marvel movies, and I've talked about this before, Marvel movies never get super bad, so there's kind of like a pretty stable floor of how they're going to be. And they're good, they're enjoyable, but forgettable, let's say. And I think a lot of people would put Iron Man 2 in there, Thor 2 in there, maybe Thor 1 in there, Incredible Hulk, where they're, like the bottom tier. Then there's the top tier of Marvel movies that are really good, but I don't think there's been any classic for the ages, Dark Knight, Star Wars level, Matrix level movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe where it's just an undisputed classic from the out of the gate. And for this one, especially given the Rotten Tomato score and given the pre-release buzz and everything, I was expecting this movie to be like, holy cow, this is amazing. And it was really amazing.
Yeah.
It was really funny. It was really fast. It was all the things that were promised, but it felt it. I don't know. I'm beginning to think, well, it only took 17 times, but I'm beginning to think Marvel movies are just never going to be great. They're never going to get that top level of filmmaking where they, transcend what they're doing. And, I guess that's not really a criticism. I mean, they figured out a dependable way to make good or really good movies, which is, nothing to sneeze at. But
now, would you say that about Civil War, however? Because I think that is a borderline great movie.
I think, you know what? I do think I do think you're right, but I think the thing about Civil War is you have to watch like 5 movies in order to get all the emotional resonance of that movie.
True.
So I you know what? I'll step back and I'll say, that for somebody that is my favorite Marvel movie, because of all the groundwork laid for Captain America and Iron Man and their storylines through that, culminating in that. And I think that's another thing that that I really stuck out with Thor: The Dark World. Ragnarok, is none of the characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, except for Tony Stark and Steve Rogers, really have that much of an arc. Thor is just kind of a really good-looking butt kicker who, he is the Prince of Asgard, and he's just going around, and that's what he was in the first movie. He kind of learned something to not be such a schmuck, but he was still pretty much of a cocky schmuck by the end of that movie and through all the subsequent movies. The second movie, it's just he had an adventure, but he didn't really change. In this one, he has an adventure, doesn't really change, even though there are things going on in this movie. And we haven't really gotten into it, but, Cate Blanchett is a fantastic villain.
She's so awesome. She goes for it.
She really goes for it. And she plays, the goddess of death, that's a part. There's something. But for me, and this is the second thing I wanted to throw out with you guys, is one of the ways that Marvel has been able to extend its series without getting really bogged down or have any wrong turns or have any, I would say, kind of like fatigue, for as much as film critics like to talk about it. There is no such thing as Marvel fatigue. There's no such thing as comic book fatigue when it comes to these movies. Is every couple of movies they kind of switch things up. They take like a conspiracy movie and a comic book movie, stick them together. They take a spy movie, comic book movie, stick them together. Heist movie, comic book movie, stick them together. And, just this last summer, we saw them do it with, a high school movie with Spiderman. And this one, for me, felt like the first parody movie. Like, it's almost parodying, like, the rhythms of heroism. Like, they actually make fun of Thor and undercut him every time he tries to be a hero in this movie. And it's almost like this movie is making fun of all of the rest of the Marvel movies, which is very fun and really smart. Did you guys have that feeling? Actually, let me step back with the amount of jokes and the rapidity of the jokes and the subject of the jokes. This seemed like it was sending up every previous Marvel movie we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like they've always kind of poked fun at Thor, though. Like in the Avengers movies, too.
True. Yeah. No, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
One of my favorite scenes, I think it's in the first Avengers, is when they're all kind of assembling together and like Hulk just punches Thor like out of the scene for like no reason other than he just hates them or something. Right. And for some reason it makes me laugh really hard every time. And so that's one of the things I love about the movie is that relationship between Thor and Hulk, because they are just very, very powerful heroes. Right. And their interplay, I think, is so fun. I didn't get the impression it was a parody, though. Did you, Peter?
No, I didn't at all. And I agree with what you said in terms of just kind of the relationship between Hulk and Thor. They're just building upon what we had already seen in other movies between the two. And so that whole aspect to me was not a parody. The making fun of him a little bit, here and there about, him being a hero. I don't know if I would call that a parody, more of just kind of trying to poke some levity into the situations where, there's some dire situations here. And like you said, you don't think that it's going to affect Thor much like what happens in this movie. And I would say, I don't know. We'll have to see because, I guess we're getting kind of into spoiler territory here. So spoilers. He loses an eye. That's a big deal. And Asgard is completely destroyed by the end of the movie. So those are some really big moments that, we don't get the impact of them here in this movie, but maybe in future Avengers movies, we'll see how they're going to impact him.
Well, okay. You may have heard this by now, but we have already played the spoiler sound, that really got me. In that and I think that was the thing that there's been a lot of criticism, in the last year or two, mainly from DC fans, that Marvel movies always undercut every dramatic moment with a joke, and they kind of pull their punches a little bit because they rarely, if ever, let their dramatic moments lie without some sort of joke to leaven it. And that was like a huge one for me, because we have this moment near the end where we've had a 3-movie story going on with Thor. He's been trying to protect Asgard. He's been trying to, protect the 9 realms. And he's failed. His sister has come, and in order to save the people of Asgard, he just has to let this, the city or the realm get destroyed, completely obliterated. And they play it for laughs at the, there's a moment of, oh wow, what's happened? But before we're able to even absorb that, one of the new characters kind of says some stuff, and then there's another explosion, and it's that moment that should be this really sad, portentous, emotional thing is totally played off for laughs, which I was pretty frustrated by, even while all of the jokes or nearly all the jokes in this movie are so funny that I love the energy of the whole movie. It's like,
right.
It's like I really like this comedy, but there's I think potentially a really good drama within this movie that is totally ignored.
I totally agree with you. Actually, that's one of the parts that actually really bothered me, was that they've gone through this very, very harrowing experience. He's lost so much, and there's been so much death there, and
right.
he personally has lost so much, and yet they don't play it off. And like you said, they should have done something kind of more of a dramatic ending there. I think that would have been much better, like kind of an ominous tone more than just kind of being funny about it. I totally agree with you there. I think that they missed a chance to kind of do something nice and special there. Kind of like they did in Civil War, where they left it kind of, at the end where Captain America drops his shield, because he realized that he no longer is the person he was. It's a very powerful moment there in that movie, and they don't make fun of it at all until throughout the rest of the movie. So I think they could have done something very similar to that here, and they decided to go against it. But
so I
agree with you.
And that is one of the things that I love about that movie, is there's this real bitter moment at the end of that movie, and that is why it's kind of my favorite, because it builds to this moment where these two best friends fight, and their friendship is broken. As he drops his shield, Tony Stark is kind of yet powerless, yelling at him, "You don't deserve it. You're not worthy," and that's it. That's the end of the fight. It's just, and this is like, we are into spoiler territory here. With Asgard destroyed, it would kind of be like, let's make a movie about Hiroshima, and as all of the refugees of Hiroshima are walking out of the city, looking back at the giant crater, that moment is played for laughs. It's just weird. Obviously, a comic book movie is different than that, but it's just, it was
just a little.
Well, just a little, but it's also kind of this kind of callousness of, I don't want to say, because I'm usually a defender of, big screen epic, event filmmaking. When it's done well, I really love it. But this is that kind of, well, we've got to make everybody enjoy the movie, so we're just going to blow this moment off. And it just, for me, it's kind of like we're never going to get, a Marvel movie is never going to have the patience to let moments breathe and let moments sink in as they should, because they're so desperate to have some sort of light, quippy little thing. It's like they've all the lessons they've learned.
Yeah, but watching the Asgard be destroyed, like he had already decided, like it wasn't the location, it's the people, and he had saved all the people. So maybe it's not supposed to be like as heavy as you guys want it to be.
Well,
he
I get
saved
it.
all the people.
But it's still, well, I mean, from his point of view, he's been around that, that thing has been around for millions of years, and he's lived in Asgard for thousands of years. So there is this huge history, there is this huge importance there that it just seems weird for a movie to have an event like that happen and to treat it so cavalierly, even though, having said all that, the tone, I'm kind of talking about it, and it might be coming off like I'm not liking this movie. I mean, I would give this movie a 7 or an 8. I really had a hell of a lot of fun in this, and 90% of it is really fun. And I think, for my money, Kate Blanchett's Hera is a fantastic villain in a run of Marvel movies where there has been a lot of forgettable villains. Now that I think about it, the Thor movies chief among them.
Yeah.
With kind of forgettable throwaway villains.
What'd you think of Jeff Goldblum? Being all Jeff Goldbloomy.
That was so much fun to watch. Oh my God.
Oh, really? Interesting.
I've been
interesting. I have a different opinion. Yeah.
Oh, tell me what you think of that, Peter. What did you think of Jeff Goldblum?
So yeah, I didn't like Jeff Goldblum as the Grandmaster at all. Not one bit.
Do you?
Just because it was just
because do you think
himself.
he was? Yeah, you think he's too Jeff Goldbloomy?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's just a terrible casting.
When did Jeff Goldblum turn into like kind of this like Christopher Walken kind of character where he's like incapable of playing anyone other than himself?
He's always been there. That's the thing. He's always been there.
I don't think he has always been that way.
When is he not? He's been like this since Jurassic Park.
But
that's
like,
probably true.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So it has just been since Jurassic Park that he's just only played Jeff Goldblum? Because before that, he didn't just play Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, but
he wasn't playing Jeff Goldblum in The Fly.
Okay, yeah, exactly. But I haven't seen The Fly for years. I almost wonder if we were to go back and watch it.
But he really has like turned into one of those actors where it's like, I'm playing myself now, and you just hire me to play this character.
Yeah.
Well,
and I think that's what Christopher Walken is too, and he used to not be.
Yeah.
Al Pacino too. He's turned into
Al Pacino's totally. Yeah. That's an excellent example. Hoo-ha!
What?
He's turned into that guy. That
guy
has the character he plays.
Would you like to see him as the Grandmaster? Hoo-ha!
You know what? I would like to see Al Pacino and Christopher Walken. Yes, that would be a lot of fun. Well, let me ask you this, Peter. There's a lot in Iron Man 3. There was a lot of fan reaction when the Mandarin, supposedly one of the great villains of the Iron Man comic books, turned out to be essentially a joke.
Yeah.
Me not being a Marvel comic book fan or reader, I didn't care one way or the other. I thought it worked for the movie. I thought it was funny. I thought it was an interesting way to go with a long-established villain. Is the Grandmaster supposed to... Is that some other big character that we're supposed to care about? Because I just thought this was fantastic. I was really enjoying every moment of this, but I don't have any kind of loyalty to the comic books.
Yeah, so the Grandmaster is not on the same tier as I would say the Mandarin is, because the Mandarin is a classic villain, definitely in Iron Man comics and other comics for that matter. But the Grandmaster is part of what they call the Elders of the Universe in comics, and that's kind of a group of long-living people with a lot of power, and they kind of get together, and a lot of times they manipulate different things that are going on in the universe to their own kind of reward. And so kind of to have the Grandmaster is somebody who's very tactical and very smart and very very concentrated in what he wants to do lots of times. That's kind of the character he is in the comics. And so to have the Grandmaster here appear, and he's this bumbling, fumbling guy who doesn't know what's going on half the time, it's kind of almost like an insult to some of the people, and I guess that's kind of when you put on your my nerd comic book frustrations here. That's I guess I'm putting on my nerd comic book frustrations. But I mean, that's just kind of like, if they should have played him a lot differently, got in a different person to play it, maybe that would have been better. But so that's my problem with it. I didn't like the way they handled the character. I think they could have done so much more with it and built it to something else that they could have used further along the lines. And now you have this guy who's going to be this bumbling idiot guy.
Wow, you really don't like Jeff Goldblum's role. You know what? Yeah, I think that's kind of what I do like about it. He seems like somebody that's been in power for so long that he's completely just rotted by it, and he is this total decadent schmuck. It was a lot watching him play that kind of character. I had a whole lot of fun. But it is that kind of, there is a little bit of quippiness and kind of back and forth misunderstanding. A lot of humor based on kind of misunderstanding and kind of a lot of chit chat back and forth and thrown away lines that I think all of the humor is of a kind of type. A lot of these characters do end up talking a lot like each other. But it's such a fun vibe. It's such a fun tone that I really enjoyed it, even while it's kind of like, I can't stay mad at you, Thor Ragnarok. I'm seeing all these flaws. I'm seeing all these problems, but I'm just having so much fun. I just can't get around it. So.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a fun movie. So the Collector, if you remember from the first Guardians of the Galaxy, they had the Collector in there, and he's the guy who has like Howard the Duck and all that. They bring him like the one of the soul gems or whatever from that Thanos is going after. So he's also an Elder of the Universe, and so they introduce him as well, but they introduce him in a much better way. He's more of kind of the way he is in the comics a little bit. So. That's kind of what I'm comparing it to, I guess. So.
Okay. All right.
What did you guys think of Valkyrie?
I liked
Tessa
her.
Thompson.
I liked her a lot. I liked her a lot
too, because I like seeing like a woman like kicking ass. That I think she's really close to being like an equal to Thor. Like, she was really smart. Right. I mean, she's not going to be as powerful as Thor, but like, she's very powerful. And I like that, she was kind of a drunk, and I can relate to her. That's all. I'm saying.
You know what? Let me ask this, because I was hearing.
I like that she was kind of surly, and
yeah.
I think typically that's a role played by a man. Like that kind of like, I'm forgetting my problems and I'm drinking and I'm kind of surly and,
right.
I don't care about you, kid. Kind of the Han Solo kind of thing. And I liked seeing her do that sort of thing. I thought she was really fun.
I did really like it, but what was the movie that Margot reviewed with us a couple weeks ago? With another kick-ass woman? Well, I'll come back to that. The reason I'm starting to get, I don't know. Actually, now that I think about it, hold on for a second.
Are you getting burned out on women that kick ass? Is that what you're saying?
No, you know what it is? I'm getting burned out on. There's a certain kind of female character.
We talked about Blade Runner. Is that what you're talking about?
That's what it is. Is every time there is a certain kind of I guess it's developing into a trope, and maybe that's what I'm rubbing against a little bit. Is these women that are there, and I guess Valkyrie doesn't really count because that's the whole point of the character, where they're almost. It's almost like Marvel or a lot of these big studio movies have kind of heard this note. So a lot of the women like Love in Blade Runner or Valkyrie here or Atomic Blonde, they all have this kind of really hard ass, they're going to be on screen to kick ass, and that is kind of their only function. And they're described in a lot of the critiques as, oh, XYZ kicks ass. And it's almost like these movies are kind of trying to get we have a female that kicks ass checkbox checked. And I thought that I don't know. She seemed like a kind of I guess that's the thing, is this role was written as though it would have been performed by a man, with the stereotypical drinking to forget the problems, with the, overabundance of violence and all that kind of stuff. I felt like there could have been something more interesting done with her, kind of like they did with Wonder Woman. Like Wonder Woman kicked ass. Wonder Woman was a character that stood equal with the men, but she was not. She was unique and different. And I'm kind of. This is a long rambling way of saying I'm wondering if they could have done something more interesting with her.
I liked her.
Yeah, I did like her too.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Definitely, because I think you could have plopped anybody kind of in that role, and they would have been okay. Right. Because the role doesn't have that many lines. It's more about how she's acting and kind of what she's doing more than kind of the acting prowess. So I think I see that, and that you could just kind of plop anybody in there. But I mean, she did a fine job for what's there.
And I think that's what it is, and that's what I'm trying to kind of. When new tropes come along sometimes, or at least for me, it takes a while to kind of put my finger on it, is as an actress, she did a great job. That was a fun character to see, but the aspects of the character seemed kind of tired. And like I would have liked to see something new and different, because it's almost kind of like, well, we're solving the problem of not having enough representation of women in these action roles by just having them do what a man would do in this role, and that's it. We check our box. I like, maybe that's what it takes. Maybe it takes a female writer and a female director to put a quote unquote kick-ass female action character on the screen like that. And maybe it is that I'm just chafing it against critics who only seem to have the adjective kick-ass to describe these women, but I don't know.
You're talking about me, right?
Well, you know what? As I said that, I thought, oh, Sonia just did this 5 minutes ago, so I should shut up. But yeah, not you. It's not just you. It's every in the last 6 months, every critic I've heard
hoo-ha!
has kind of expressed it like this. That's all I'm saying.
Now you juxtapose that with the role Cate Blanchett had as Hela. Like that role is definitely unique, and I think the way that character is developed is much more interesting, and there's a lot more layers there, and you kind of immediately know like what she's driven and what what's driving her, and like she's just this evil person who's going to do whatever it takes to kind of take control, and so that one was really well done, I think, in terms of how they developed that character.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Hela played a character, and Tessa Thompson, through no fault of her own, played kind of a stereotype. And I when I was,
I disagree with that.
So, all right, well, yeah,
so there.
It's entirely possible I'm wrong.
Yes, it is. Topic 2, Stranger Things, Season 2. Unless you've been trapped in the Upside Down, you know that the second season of Stranger Things dropped on October 27th on Netflix. But we have a no binge watching required rule here on Dorking Out. So we're talking about the show now. and I still didn't finish it. If you don't know what Stranger Things is, well, welcome back from the Upside Down, and you don't need to watch the show because you lived it. Created by the Duffer Brothers, Stranger Things is about 4 preteen boys in the early 80s who get involved in the mysterious goings-on in their small town in Indiana. It's a mix of Stephen King and John Carpenter and Steven Spielberg. It's got horror and sci-fi and a big helping of nostalgia. Plus, you can throw in some Gremlins and some Goonies with the addition of Sean Astin to the cast, and Aliens with the addition of Paul Reiser. The Duffer Brothers have said that Stranger Things 2 is more of a sequel than a second season, and I think that comes across. It's got a little sequelitis. It's bigger, and it's got more. Speaking of more, joining us to talk about Stranger Things is Albert Muller, right? Muller? Muller. Got it. And since all of his friends call him AJ, we will be calling him Albert. And he writes for dailygrindhouse.com. Thank you for joining us, AJ.
Thank you for having me. How are you guys doing?
Good. I'm so excited you're here.
I'm pretty excited to be here. This is going to be fun.
Spoiler on my review, I would be doing better if I liked this show more. But you're the guest, so we're going to let you go first.
Well, I want to ask you first, what did you think of the first season?
I loved the first season. I thought the first season was fantastic. My initial reaction on the day of watching it, I don't binge a lot of stuff. Netflix shows, anything with between 8 and 12 episodes around there, I usually break up into about 3 days. But the first season of Stranger Things I did in one day.
Wow.
And I don't really do that. And I did with Stranger Things. I just devoured it, loved it. It was like it was made for me. You know, Stephen King, Steven Spielberg with a little bit of Carpenter brushed over it. Yeah, it's like it was made in a lab.
They created it in a lab just for you.
That's how it felt. You know, one of those really special things. It's all subjective, but we all come across art and whatnot that's blended with all of the influences and all the things, you know, especially when it's nostalgia based, the stuff we grew up on. And it just, you're responding to it and feeling good about it before you've ever really had time to process exactly what it is that's happening to you. You're just purely responding to it. And that's the reaction I had with Stranger Things. I was just into it before I really was wondering about the why, the how, any of the aesthetics of it, any of the storytelling mechanics, the structure, any of that. I was just responding to it on a pure fanboy level. So yeah, you could say I loved it. It was my favorite thing. It is my favorite thing, that first season, in a long time, in anything really, you know, movies, books, TV, any of that, in any medium. It was the one that affected me the most. So yeah, I was really.
So I think you liked it.
Very much. You could say that, yeah. Just a little bit.
And what did you think of season 2?
Well, I loved it. I wrote a really positive review for Daily Grindhouse, and I'll kind of repeat a small piece of that here. The internet being what it is, there's bound to be a lot of discussion and or argument about whether or not it's better than season 1, and I don't really have that doesn't interest me so much. I mean,
right.
It is bigger in a lot of ways. You could clearly tell they were really trying to go after that sequel feeling, but I liked it better than I did the first one because it did what, for me, a lot of good sequels do, which is to expand upon story and character. And it wasn't just a regurgitation and repeat of what they had done in the first season story-wise. I mean, of course, there's going to be similar aspects and whatnot, but for the most part, they went off in new directions and split up the groups that you might have expected from the first season, all that stuff. And it just kind of built upon the world and the characters in a way that I found really rewarding. Yeah, I'm going to respond to the nostalgia aspects of it because I was a kid of the 80s. I was 5 in 1980 and 15 in 1990. So those are pretty formative years, I'd say.
Yeah.
But that kind of got my attention. But what drew me into the show as a whole and made me love it so much was the story and specifically the characters. And what they did with both of those in the second season, I was totally on board.
Yeah, I hope that my intro doesn't give the impression that I'm not enjoying the second season, because I am really enjoying the second season, but it does have like that sequel feeling to me that, just it is a little bit more like there's more monsters, there's more kids, there's more horror elements, which I'm fine with. And I super love these characters. Like, I was so happy in the first episode. I was like, there they are. Yay. Like, I just, I love spending time with them. And I think it's because, I was a kid of the 80s. I was a teenager in the 80s because I'm old, but I'm probably more like Nancy's age. But I just love the show, and I'm enjoying the mystery, and I am a little frustrated and I'm not finished, I'm like, a little over halfway. And there are things that frustrate me, but there's so much to love that the things that frustrate me, I let it slide, because I'm enjoying it so much because of the characters. Before I go on and on, Smith, what did you think?
Well, I'm glad you guys are having fun. This show somehow has almost completely evaporated for me. I don't know what it is, because I really did like the first season. It was a really fun surprise, a great melding of all the elements that AJ was describing. But not in a just, hey, we're going to have a nostalgia trip here. It's we're going to take all these things that everybody's kind of familiar with and liked and kind of reimagine them. And, utilize the Stephen King and the Spielberg and the Carpenter to make something our own, even that strongly echoes those 80s Amblin movies. J.J. Abrams, I think, tried this a couple of years ago with Super 8, which I think was
Super 8.
Which, I think was ultimately a failed experiment, although it was really fun.
Not for me.
I didn't think it hit. I didn't think it was nearly as successful as season 2 or season 1 of Stranger Things. I thought season 1 did it perfectly. I thought season 2 for me was actually a lot like, the Duffer Brothers have talked about it not being so much season 1 and season 2, but Stranger Things 1 and Stranger Things 2, kind of like a sequel.
Yeah, that's what I said at the intro.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Wow.
Thanks for listening, Smith.
No. Anyway, par for the course. Point is...
Oh, were you talking, Sonia?
That's right. Oh, my God. I've been outed, if everyone didn't already know this was the dynamic. Anyway, this feels like an 80s sequel with all the drawbacks of an 80s sequel. It's more the same. Things are amped up by 20%, but ultimately not a lot of new ground is broken, I didn't think. There were, I hear what you're saying, AJ, and that there were kind of different combinations of characters hanging out together and doing different things. But the overall, at the end of the season, if you look at where the characters are and look at where they were at the end of season 1, I was kind of shocked at how much had not changed. I don't know if this is really a spoiler, because I'm not talking about who lives and who dies or whatever, if anyone lives or dies. But it's one of those things that we've talked about a lot on this show, which is if we live in an era where if a show is not really good right out of the gate, or you're really committed to the idea of watching the show right out of the gate, it's just, I don't have time for it. And if I were not watching this for our show here, I probably would have skipped out like episode 6 or 7. Even while I love all the characters, even while I love the setting, like everything that I love is still there, but it's just I was very frustrated with what they did with the characters or failed to do, I think.
What did you want them to do?
Well, AJ's right in that they took the characters and kind of put them under stress, and a lot of sequels do this, where we have a group of friends in, season one or the first of a movie of a series, and in the second movie they show the jeopardy of the danger that they're in by kind of breaking them all up. They're not together as a group. They're all scattered alone to the four winds, and it kind of heightens their each individual danger. But for me, it was just like the great thing about this show was that dynamic of all of them together trying to figure stuff out and do stuff. And I thought this was all a lot of kind of bickering and a lot of jealousy and meanness and whatever between the characters. It's interesting to have a little bit of it, but it seemed like, that was the majority of Mike's season, was being basically pissed off and jealous.
Aww.
And 11, 11 is a fantastic character. Millie Brown's performance of her is great. And what she is doing for 2/3 of this run is, I cannot figure out why they're using her like that. It's almost you know what it is? This metaphor came up when I was watching it, and there's all this drama going on with the Fast and Furious movies, and the rumor has been that they're not having Vin Diesel in scenes with other major characters because nobody can stand to work with the guy, so he's kind of off on his own thing while the rest of the crew is doing different adventures with The Rock. And I kind of got this feeling like, what are like Finn and Millie not speaking, so they're not going to be in any scenes together? Or it was just a very weird, or it's like, couldn't they
think that's not true.
I don't think it's true either, but it's kind of like these characters are not together at all.
Yeah,
part of me is wondering
that
like
they're not together. Like, it is because you love the kids so much, and
right?
You enjoy them so much when they're together that it is a little frustrating that they're all separated. But I did enjoy some of the episode I just saw ended with Dustin and Steve like getting in a car together, and I was like, well, that should be an entertaining pairing.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to that.
That's gonna pay off.
Okay, and I do think it's a bummer that they've got 11 like in a cabin in the woods far away from everybody, and then they plug in this other girl, and she's fine. It's not a knock on her or even the character, really. It's just, it feels to me like, hey, we need to plug a girl in here.
Right.
And
yeah, there's the degree.
And it's not her fault.
Yeah.
It's she's just no 11. That's all.
No. And I mean, if she's fulfilling the female role dynamic, then yeah, I mean, she's obviously going to be a step down from 11. I just kind of read it as a situation where it didn't feel so much to me. I mean, I'm not going to say it felt fully organic, but I wasn't questioning it exactly in terms of, oh, they're just putting another little girl in here. It felt more like I believe this was set for the boys in their 8th grade year, and they're about ready to go to high school next year. So, they're going to start, being interested in
girls.
Yeah. And so they're going to, and of course, that whole dynamic of two boys, having a crush on the same girl, and what will it do to the group? And they could have gone, a lot of the familiar routes with it and have them really get into a fight over her.
Right.
And both of them end up hating each other by the end, or on the outs as the season goes out. And not to spoil a whole lot for you, but I mean, it plays out in a certain way, and they only do it, I mean, like I said, they could have done it a certain way and they didn't, but I understand some people not liking the storyline this season, and Chris, that's what it sounds, or sorry, Smith.
No!
That's what it sounds like.
Yes! Join me.
I mean, if the story doesn't grab you, I mean, there's really not much to be done about that. You want to watch the characters that you've come to love in a first season in something that grabs you and inspires you in the way the first season did. But if it kind of feels like it's treading ground, or just kind of, like you said, it ends without a whole lot of change, Yeah, I mean, I can understand that. A lot of people have said that they don't like that the dynamic has changed because that is what drew them so much to the first season.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if the Duffers are being specifically sadistic. I know some writers and creatives like to do this where they deny you what they know that the audience believes they want going in so that you feel not like you're ripped off, but you have something so that when you do get it, if they do actually follow through and give you the pairings that you want or all the gang together again when you want, at the end you have this feeling of relief, and it's manipulative, of course, but
Right.
That's storytelling. But I really liked that the way they did it allowed for it advanced not just the story, and it allowed them to keep certain characters where you were like, okay, well, what is this person going to do in order to stay involved in the story as it propels along? Like Sony was just saying, here's Steve and he's with Dustin. What's
Right.
going to happen here? Well, that's, one of my favorite arcs of the whole season, Steve and the kids. That advances the character in such an interesting way. And it does kind of deny the audience a certain degree of what they believed they wanted. But I think the way they did it was something that they knew they were going to have to give the audience to give them the information they needed for the story to be told the way they wanted to, for them to be able to pull it off with the plan that they had in mind. I would imagine that next season, the kids are going to be together a lot more in group scenes, and we'll have to see, Max and 11, will they get along? Oh my God, that whole deal. But, also just in terms of giving the audience what they want, I think certain revelations happen in this season. Certain characters have to go through certain things for them to reach climactic levels of importance or strength or what have you. And it does seem a little bit by the numbers, but I just, speaking for me personally, like Sonia said, it didn't bother me so much, even when I realized that they were just putting certain things together so it could end the way that they wanted to, because, especially as you're hurtling into the last third of something like this, you're going to have to start matching everything up one way or the other. And it didn't seem too clunky to me personally.
Right.
Well, also, if the kids hadn't changed at all, if they had kept the dynamic exactly the same, then people would complain. They would say, how come the kids haven't changed at all?
Yeah, no, I get that. You know what it is? Actually, that I think that kind of clarifies it for me is I do understand all of that, but I almost have the feeling, you were talking earlier, AJ, about this kind of being engineered specifically for you to love, which I totally get. And that was kind of a critique a little bit of the first season that I never really bought into, which is it seemed very calculated and engineered. And for me, kind of all of those critiques kind of came true for this season. It was almost as though they realized, wow, we have a monster hit and we could keep this going on for years. So we're going to pump the brakes on the pace of the storytelling. So that's how 11 goes from being in the cabin secretly for, 1 or 2 episodes to 5 episodes or 6 episodes. Or where Mike is kind of irritated that there's this new girl and he's kind of jealous that she's taking attention away, the attention of his friends away from, the group. And he's kind of jealous for not 1 or 2 episodes. He's jealous for, 9, 8 or 9 episodes.
Yeah.
And it's just,
he's pissed off pretty much the whole time. I'm going to agree with you there completely. I mean, if we're just talking real talk, Mike's pretty much an asshole for most of this whole season. I mean, if we're just going to call a spade here and call it what it is, slap our cards down on the table, use your own king homily here, that's what it is. Mike is just kind of a cranky, salty little bastard this season, and he's pissed off. And, Sonia mentioned that earlier, and I think that's really important. They only do it in so many horror sequels, or they only, it's lip service usually, but everyone starts off this season really affected by the events in the previous season. It's been a year, but it's still very, very much a huge factor in their lives, whether it's because it's so present they can't ignore it, or whether because they're trying so hard to ignore it.
Right.
And that kind of
They
makes
all
it its
have
own
post-traumatic
shadow.
stress disorder.
Exactly. Exactly.
them.
So Mike is pissed off. That's his deal. You know, he's just angry the whole time. And that's coming at it from a story perspective, especially as a fan, you don't want to see Mike, the little ringleader of our, you know, intrepid ragtag gang of little dudes that first season, and now he's just pissed off the whole time. That's not fun. You know, that kind of sucks.
Right.
But I will say on the other side of it, in terms of with 11 being gone, I think that it's nakedly commercial to me, but I also think it's kind of brilliant because for the same reason I think that they're going to make sure that the group dynamic is present next year. I think they listen to the fans to a degree. I mean, they're not going to do everything that everybody says, but I think they pay attention to what the discourse is on the show. And, you know, I don't think they pander, but I think they kind of take things into consideration. And one of the things I think they figured out after that first season was, as great as Winona Ryder was, to see her come back, and it was great. I loved having her back. I'd missed her for so long, and here she was, had a role to really sink her teeth into, and was just at 0 to 60, and then was at 60 the whole time. And that was great.
Yeah.
But the two breakout stars for me that really threw it out there were Millie Bobby Brown and David Harbour.
Yeah.
And I think they deservedly got a lot of attention for being so awesome in those parts, indelible in their roles, that the Duffers or somebody came up with a bright idea. Wouldn't it be kind of dumb if we didn't have them to play off each other for a great part of the season and just let these two powerhouse actors really just kind of just do that character thing? And so I think that was probably pretty calculated in that respect, but I think it paid dividends. That scene where they have their little showdown, their little fight, is intense. When I said I'm a big fan of the show, I wasn't lying. I did the same thing with this season as I did last year, and that's watch the whole thing in one day. And also, like last year, I started rewatching the season again the next day.
Wow.
Right.
I am on the 5th episode of my 3rd rewatch.
Holy smokes!
You are hardcore.
Yeah, if I find something I love, I kind of tend to dive in head first and just wallow in it. So
I think that's awesome.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to complain. It's a lot of fun, and that scene in the cabin just happened in the rewatch that I'm doing, and it's amazing to watch them play off of each other and really just that to me. Like Smith was saying earlier, I'm sorry, Chris, like he was saying earlier, loving these characters and wanting the story to be pushed forward. For me personally, I think a lot of the writing, it's that really difficult tightrope. Are you actually going to be able to further both story and character with every scene that you write? And I think most of this did. And for some people, what it advanced in the character is not really going to, interest them. They're going to find it boring. They're going to think it's wheel spinning, and that's fine. It sucks. I mean, I would have wished that everybody would be having the same excited reaction that I am, but I mean, I definitely understand.
Yeah.
Right.
But I want to say too, I love Winona Ryder, and I'm also like so glad that I was so excited in the first season that she was back. And one of my husband and I have been watching the episodes together, and we were talking about how we both love Winona Ryder, but also like I love that her character always believes Will, like always believes her son,
right,
and always wants to do the right thing by him. And I feel like a lesser show would have had, even after everything that happened in the first season, we would have had like 3 episodes of no one believes him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And God, I hate that. I hate the no one believes the person everyone needs to believe story. So thank you, Stranger Things 2, for not doing that, because it drives me up the wall.
Yeah. No, I hear you there. I did, there was a lot to like about it. I felt like one of the things that I love about Netflix shows is you don't really know a lot, or maybe it's just me. You don't really know a lot going into them, even a new season. Because like with with shows in the 2000s, 90s, 80s, it's kind of like, all right, we know that this is the main cast of the show. We know that they have to do 22 episodes. We know that everybody's contracts are running for 5 years. So we kind of know at the beginning of season 2, this is where we're going. No one's going to, there's everything kind of stays in a static state. And one of the things that I love about modern, prestige storytelling is you don't really know. And I think I guess that's my number one note that I've mentioned, is I was just kind of shocked at how much like a 1980s network drama this felt. It's like people are moving around the board, they're doing things, and there are moments. These are characters that I like, so I am enjoying moments of it, but the overarching structure and the overarching story, by the end of the season, I was kind of shocked at how underwhelmed I was, even though I loved watching Lucas have his little moment with Mad Max. I was loving, a lot of this stuff. I loved watching Dustin in the last episode, and kind of seeing his kind of goofy transformation, which was a lot of fun. But yeah, well, let me ask you this, AJ. Have you heard anything? Because I'm at a point now where I intentionally don't try to read spoilers, don't try to read inside gossip about a lot of stuff like this. Is there, where do you see, based on A, your hopes, and B, your information, where do you see season 3 and 4 going?
Wow. Yeah, I don't really have any information. I have thoughts about the show, but yeah, I try my best to avoid. I don't watch a lot of trailers these days, or I don't go out of my way to read articles about stuff that I already know for sure that I'm interested in watching. If I know the story, like I would watch the trailer for it, because I that's my favorite horror novel ever, and I know the story backward and forward, and I thought I would look at the trailers so I could see how they approached it. But if I don't know anything about the story but have a pretty good idea that I want to see it, I won't watch the trailer.
Right.
I allowed myself to watch one full-length trailer for Stranger Things 2, the one with the Thriller song cue in it. That's actually my biggest complaint about season 2, is that they didn't have that song in the show. I'm pissed. I'm pissed. Do you hear me, Netflix?
You must be loving this.
I said you weren't going to spoil this for me. Now you're telling me there's no Thriller?
There's no
Damn
Thriller.
it!
I've ruined it all. I apologize. I hope I can be invited back. This has been great, but I understand if I've, breached
No. You can invite back. In fact, there might be a host position opening up here soon. So if you wanted to, two dudes talking about stuff. I don't think there are any podcasts like that.
No, good God, no. What are you talking about?
Do you guys have a favorite character?
That's rough. Because if I'm thinking about the boys, I want to say Dustin because he's just awesome. But, Elle is, well, she's Elle. She's rad. And then, of course, Hopper, who is my spirit animal. And it's really rough. But yeah, it would probably have to be between Elle and Hopper. I think the characters are great. And I think that as well as they are written, they wouldn't be what they are without Harbour and Brown. And they just amaze me with that work. I mean, really. So, I'm really invested in, I know it's in those two characters.
Yeah, me too, actually.
I know I'm cheating. I picked 2, but I couldn't help it.
That's okay. We're well versed in cheating, and to underscore that, I'm going to pick 2. I think for me, it's Dustin and Lucas. I just love their goofy little back and forths and where they seem to be irritating each other, but you can tell that they really like each other, which is older than dirt dynamic, but I just really like it. That was one of the few threads that I really kind of connected onto this season. And let me ask you this. The development of 11, I'm kind of like, she's becoming incredibly powerful, incredibly worldly in a lot of ways, but she seems to, at the same time, be kind of meek and quiet and still, I don't know, like the dynamic of her and Mike in episodes 8 and 9 seem to be very, I don't know, like I don't want to be all pejorative and just talk about the dynamic of she's got to, be the girlfriend to his, center of the show character. But it had that kind of feeling like, why is she timid? That's what it is. She seems to have this real timid vibe around him and vibe around essentially everyone but Hopper, that I feel like that character would have gotten past by this point, or maybe I'm just looking too closely.
Well, if I'm just going to, assume certain things, I think my estimation is just that she is incredibly strong and self-possessed, and she's got certain experience with a lot of things. She's learned how to deal with fear and unexpected stuff popping up that she's got to handle, or, create obstacles to overcome, what have you. But in terms of being a kid and being around other kids, the whole social factor of it, and having a crush on somebody, or not understanding why someone makes you feel a certain way, Hopper's been teaching her a lot in the subsequent year. And,
Right.
That's one of the things he screams out, I teach and I feed, and, all that stuff.
Right.
But, he's trying to acclimate her, to socialize her, not necessarily with kids, for the safety reasons and whatnot. But she has, as you said, she's gotten a bit more worldly and began to understand how certain things work that she didn't before. But in terms of just being a regular kid, she doesn't really know how to do that. So I think that's a different kind of fear or anxiety that she's not used to having. And, you could also write it off to simple butterflies in the stomach, because they seem to have that weird tentative. They talked more often, obviously, in the first season because they were allowed to interact more, him showing her around the house and his kick-ass little dinosaur Rex, because he's clever and all that stuff. And there was that tentative, kids getting to know each other stuff. And then by the end, they had their sweet little kiss and, oh my God.
Yeah.
And then now this season, they're apart, but when they're around each other again, I saw part of that as a kind of, not a dreaming kind of, are you real? Is this really happening? But
Right.
A little bit of that, kind of like, I've been waiting for this for so long, and I've been hoping that this moment will come, and then now it's here, and I don't know what to do with myself.
Right.
I'm not as far into the show as you guys, so I can't speak to the situation really, but I would also say that maybe it has to do with, I don't know, like you could have all kinds of crazy superpowers, but still being a teenager is intimidating, and
Yeah.
navigating social situations and being around someone that you like is hard.
Yeah.
That's the important part. Not just like.
Yeah.
That's the key.
She
Yeah.
likes
Likes
him.
Likes him.
Yeah.
I got it. All
like
right.
more than a friend, Smith.
Oh.
She likes him like more than a friend.
Oh. It turns out it was the 8th time you guys mentioned it that it finally got through.
You're
8th
welcome.
time's the charm. So
You have teenagers, Smith. Ask them about it.
I'd rather not. Thank you. I don't need to do that. And that's how I became a grandfather. No.
Oh gosh. I think that's all the time we have. So I want AJ to tell everyone, where can people find you on the internets?
Nowadays, you can find me at Daily Grindhouse, dailygrindhouse.com, and Some of my other reviews are archived at horrorview.com under the name AJ McCready. No points for knowing what movie that's referencing. Y'all should know.
And that's where they can find you on Twitter as well.
Yeah, my Twitter handle is at AJ_McCready. This
was super fun.
Yeah, thanks for coming, man.
I'm so glad you said yes.
We will definitely be asking you back.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I had a blast. This was a lot of fun, guys.
Hey, want more Dorking Out?
Yep.
You can visit our website at dorkingoutshow.com.
You can.
And you can like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter.
On Twitter.
Do you listen to us on iTunes?
Yep.
It's cool.
It's cool.
We won't tell anyone.
Nope.
Please, take a few minutes out of your busy day of pretending to work while you watch cat videos to give us a review on iTunes.
Cat videos!
For some reason, iTunes really cares about reviews, and it helps us attract more listeners, and you want us to have more listeners and be popular and cool, don't you?
Yep.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
And now, on with the show.
Yeah. That brings us to Status Check, our weekly look right now at Star Trek Discovery, and rejoining us today is my favorite living critic, Jeff Bond. He is the author of several Star Trek books, as well as a forthcoming book on Seth MacFarlane's The Orville. So let me start out today, Jeff. Orville's been picked up for season 2. What do you know about it?
I know that it's been picked up for season 2. I think, I had definitely, heard rumblings that they were confident it was going to be picked up for a second season. I think I had said in a previous installment that I knew they were holding at least one episode back for the second season. And in terms of, what the network or studio is going to do, I don't know whether that's like an incredible piece of leverage or not, but it does, sort of indicate that, that it seems like something they wouldn't do necessarily if they thought they were only going to run for one season.
Right.
So, and I do know some of the people, on staff and in visual effects on the show are obviously very happy that it's going forward, and it seems to be it seems to be consistently well received among Trek fans on my Facebook feed. So that show is doing well.
So actually, let me ask you this, because I think in this bizarre polarized world of the internet, there seems to have developed this Marvel versus DC thing with Star Trek Discovery and the Orville, even though you can watch them both and they're fine. There's millions of Star Trek and Star Wars fans that love them both. I don't know why these weird dynamics start up. But how do you think the Orville has kind of developed over the season, and when you step back? My take on the pilot for the Orville, and I think that it's something that a lot of people in the production staff largely agreed with, was that it didn't necessarily launch the format in the greatest light. It's a very difficult concept to kind of get across what the show is going to be, that it's basically going to be stories told fairly seriously with, humor kind of around the edges, and more character-oriented humor and contemporary humor, placed in a futuristic format. And I think that the pilot set all that up, but didn't necessarily get you in love with the characters right away. But I think that as the show has gone on, it's gotten much more confident, and what MacFarlane, was trying to do, I think, has become, more clear. And the characters and actors have really started to resonate. I think they did really right from the first few episodes.
and there's been some unevenness and some episodes I haven't loved as much as others, but I it's always a very enjoyable show to watch. And I think in terms of the fan reaction, that was largely set in stone, I think, among certain fans. The minute they found out about the Orville, I think way before it launched, there was this idea. I was like, oh, I'm not going to like the new Star Trek show, but this, the Orville is going to be what Star Trek is now, and that I'm going to approve of that. So I sort of agree with you. I don't really see any reason to take a partisan approach to that. I think it's actually amazing that we have two big budget, lavish, Star Trek type shows on the air right now, and the fact that they are totally different is great. We're not watching two Rick Berman shows,
right?
And we're seeing things done in a very different way on both of these shows. So I think that's terrific.
Yeah, I do too. It's funny. It's developed in. I go to the Star Trek subreddit, every once in a while, and with different subreddits, they kind of develop their own stereotypes after a while. Before Star Trek Discovery launched, every 9 days there would be some posting, hey, I really like Enterprise, why don't people like it? And then the same discussion would be had as was had 9 days before. And the new stereotype is, hey, I'm really starting to like Discovery. I didn't give it a chance, or I didn't really like it at first, when I heard about it, blah, blah, blah. But now I really like it. And then, they take 15 paragraphs to wax on about what would have been obvious if they had just had some patience and watched the show.
Yeah.
But
the idea that this was going to be, an atrocity and be unwatchable, and I think it's a really similar attitude, and kind of an outgrowth of the attitude about the J.J. Abrams films among certain fans, which is that this is a personal insult and an intentional personal insult directed right at them. That we people actually plotted, accumulated, millions of dollars in a production facility and deal with a network, and specifically so they could create something that would personally insult, Joe average fan.
Right.
And that's kind of the most crazy making thing for me is like, these people decided to devote years of their life and, careers to annoy somebody.
Right, exactly. Well, on that note, let's move over to Star Trek Discovery, Civis Pacem Parabellum, which I am sure is A, Latin, and B, horribly mispronounced by me. I believe it's Latin.
God, you got to pronounce them.
I believe that's Latin for.
And did you? Okay, good. I'm just going to say, did you translate it? Because I did not.
I think it's. I've heard, or at least I've looked around the web. This might not be right at all. In order to have peace, prepare for war. I think.
Okay, right. Yeah, that sounds right.
This is an episode that has Michael Burnham, Saru, and Ash Tyler going to a planet that A, looks spectacular, B, reminded me more than a little bit of James Cameron's Pandora, and C, where they go and talk to, I guess, the natives about the natural resonant transmitter on the planet, that transmitting crystal on the planet, which will let them ferret out cloaked Klingon ships. And I, for one, was blown away by I guess they did this with color correcting. The color palette for this planet, a lot of times, especially in the Next Generation, but, in all the Star Trek shows, it's like, all right, we're going to beam down to this planet, and this looks like Glendale. or this looks like we're shooting around Barstow or something. It's kind of like there's 3 planet types in the universe, all of which seem to look like Southern California. This one seems to look really different, with kind of these, huge forests of blue leaf trees and all this stuff. And it really did look alien, and it kind of hit me anew at how different the technology, the special effects technology, could let you really almost play out the full potential of Star Trek for the first time. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, granted, now all these shows are made, in Vancouver or Toronto, and
actually,
so
right,
if you're watching the Flash or a lot of the CW shows, everything kind of looks like has that Twin Peaks kind of northwestern pine forest look. But yes, with this show they were able to manipulate a lot of that in pretty spectacular ways. I was noticing even when they're sort of inside this kind of alien hut that seemed, if you watch it for a while, it's like, okay, they're on a green screen. But without, at least I didn't feel like it was like green screen acting and the people were disassociated from what they were doing. But the technology level and when you're doing only 15 episodes per season, and you've got this kind of money and support from the studio, this is what you can do now. So it's interesting because on the so much of the show looks spectacular. I'm still hot and cold on shots of the Discovery, some of which are gorgeous and some of which look very simple, computer rendering. And I was actually noticing, not to jump way ahead of ourselves, but that a lot of the shots from next week's kind of half season finale look really terrific and like seem to up the ante on getting more of a movie look to some of those shots. I mean, in terms of this episode, I don't know if you got a premise thesis question to set me off, but I'll just go ahead anyway.
Yeah, go ahead anyway. Hey, Jeff, what do you think of the episode?
This is probably by far the most Star Trek of any of the Discovery episodes that we've seen, in terms of getting back to a formula that goes all the way back to the original series and is very simple, which is that you beam down, have a crewman beam down, fall under the influence of a kind of superior advanced life form or culture that makes them behave in strange ways, and there's something about whether this represents a life form that we should aspire to, or a culture that we should aspire to that's superior to ours, or whether it's something that we need to fight off and not go along with. And this creates conflict among our characters. And as that, I did not find it a particularly successful execution of the formula, because by the end, for one thing, we're left hanging because it's a cliffhanger, right? That's going to lead into the next episode, but there's not a clear kind of thesis for the episode. Like, what does all this mean, apart from giving us some more background on Saru? And I thought, Doug Jones once again gives a fantastic performance, and we learned some interesting things about his race and his character, that he's capable of running 85 miles an hour, right? And that he's affected, his senses are so acute that he's affected by this kind of ambient sound that's being created on the show, which I thought, I don't know if this was intentional, but I thought that was kind of a funny, interesting idea, because It's actually a throwback to the earliest sound design in the original series, where when you would beam down to a planet, they had these kind of bell trees and this wind and chimes like in the background,
right,
to create this like aliens sonic environment. And so it was kind of like Saru was, being annoyed by the sound design. So I like, it was really fun to see I still like to call them landing parties. I hate the term away team.
right.
It always annoyed me from Next Generation, but it's cool to see them, running around on a planet, using their equipment, being on location and dealing with an alien race. I totally agree. It was too evocative of Avatar, even down to the visuals of kind of showing these not spores but little wisps of energy that looked like the kind of seed spores that you saw floating around on Pandora.
Right.
And the whole idea of the whole planet being alive and interconnected is right out of Avatar. I mean, the only difference is that we don't see any larger life forms. It's all kind of ethereal, just plants and this kind of like energy mist.
Right.
So that was a little too on the nose, given how Avatar was like the most successful movie ever. It's a little hard to miss that influence.
Yes, exactly.
So and this was also very A plot, B plot, because we have the whole B plot of the Klingon woman who's, I'm not going to remember her name, but is figured in the last few episodes, who's an interrogator. And I was even a little bit confused by that plot. I'm assuming that she does kill Cornwell, which seems kind of an ignominious end for that character that we're going to spend a whole episode with her, so she's kind of dispatched.
That seemed very. Let me ask you about that, because that seemed very. It almost seemed like one of those things where, because this Klingon, female commander, interrogator, says she wants to defect, gets Cornwall out. They kind of get caught in the hall, and I almost wondered, like, all right, let's pretend to fight. If we get caught in the hall as we're going to the thing, let's pretend to fight. But then she actually does seem to really kill Admiral Cornwell. And there would be several shots where, after the commander left and after they were alone again, where you would expect Cornwell to kind of shake herself awake and like get up. All right, the plan worked. Let's go. But she remained dead in all of those shots. So I don't even. Is she dead or is she not dead?
It seemed quite muddled to me, and the funny thing was that it seemed the first time I felt like I had a little bit of clarity in terms of the kind of skullduggery among the actual Klingon houses. I did have some kind of idea what she was trying to do in terms of, there was some real motivations established for her, and you got an idea where her character was. And I thought the actress too was doing a great job of getting her performance across through this gigantic makeup, and she was definitely registering as a character very strongly. But at the same time, I completely had no idea what she was doing with Cornwell, and I have to assume, since we never get any further reference to Cornwell being alive, that she's dead by the end. And if we find out differently, it's going to be kind of annoying, because it really, like I said, it really was muddled in how they executed that.
Yeah.
So this was, it's for one, like I said, we don't get a real thesis for the episode because it's left on a cliffhanger. We do. I think it's a nice scene in sickbay at the end when Saru is kind of dealing with what happened, but it's mostly because of Doug Jones' performance. I mean, I was thinking just like how, he's just lying there on the sickbay table, but physically he registers this, kind of like shame and depression without even moving. And,
right.
Which given, like, I think that when I talked to Jason Isaacs, he was joking about how, Doug Jones basically is like having to act with a bowling ball on his head. And the fact that he is able to register, I mean, he's just a consummate physical, mime and performer who gets, his entire body expresses the character. And I think that's an amazing accomplishment. And I think some people were worried that I already saw some kind of talk on the Facebook about like, oh my God, they're going to kill Saru, with this episode. And I don't see them doing that. And I think it would be a huge loss for the show if, he's a tremendous asset to this show, and they obviously need to keep him.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you about that real quick, because I heard, and maybe it was something that I misunderstood a couple days ago, that, I was reading a little bit. I saw some headline like, oh, the next episode of Star Trek Discovery is going to change the series. It's going to change the game, blah, blah, blah. And then I watched it last night. And it's like, oh, this is a completely anodyne, completely normal, very old-fashioned episode. So was it supposed to be this episode? Is it supposed to be the next episode where the game is changed?
I have not heard anything about that. And but I mean, we are heading to a mid-season finale, which I can only assume will have some other tremendous cliffhanger, because they're going to want you to re-up your subscription and continue to watch when the show comes back.
Right.
In January or whenever. So, I think it's built, kind of baked into the show that they probably could kill any character at any time, but at the same time, they have not really raised any major stakes in doing that, because the one time they've killed like a sort of character you assume is going to be a regular, it's really your only your second appearance on the show. You barely had any time to get to know the character, so that seems kind of like a false promise in a way. But I also assume that they will kill somebody. Somebody was complaining that in some of the complaints that I have seen about the show, that they haven't kind of expanded the kind of base of characters. They were saying like, oh, there's only 4 characters that are really getting developed. I think it's more like 6, and it is the core cast. And if you look back on like something like the original series, it's, you're only seeing 3 people really, and exactly. You're not seeing them really be developed. They're more set in stone, and maybe Spock goes through some development.
Right.
So if you have 6 people who are actually evolving, that's still a lot more than you would see on some of these other shows.
Yeah.
So I don't really see it as a problem. And you were also, there's definitely background characters that they seem interested in. They put the kind of like a droid woman character in the captain's chair. She gets the con after Lorca leaves the bridge early in the episode, and there seem to be some. And there's the character who's another character from the Shenzhou, the woman who sort of has a little implant, the redhead who. She's got one damaged eye or something.
Right.
So I see them, laying the groundwork for expanding on some of these other characters. But Burnham is, a challenging I've seen some other comments I've seen is that, people are, I don't know if it's uncomfortable, but like maybe a little frustrated with that character because she has to start off from a point of being, unemotional and distant. I think I find her performance to be very good. And she's very good in this episode, but it's somewhat limited in what she gets to do. There's some romance for her, and she's got to fight, Saru. But in terms of how the episode story registers on her, it's really much more about Saru than it is about Burnham. So right. We don't get a big evolution of her character through this.
So where would you put this one? Of the 8 episodes we've seen so far, how would you rank this one?
I'd rank it fairly low just because it didn't do anything really different. And I think that I have no doubt that for certain fans, this might be the greatest episode because of the way it fits in with kind of the comfortable, formula for Star Trek. But what I've liked about all the previous episodes is the ways in which they've broken out of the Star Trek formula and tried to do things that are different and maybe a little edgier. So this one, and it's also, as I've said, it's hard to completely judge this episode because it seems to be part of what we're going to see in the next episode. And it's also, this whole idea that this race, alien race on this planet is summoning the Klingons and the Federation to their planet is a big throwback to Errand of Mercy, and it's almost too similar that again you've got it's the same story. You have a race of that's advanced beyond the need for physical bodies, that have a philosophy apparently of total peace, and that are going to use their superior power to maybe force the Federation and the Klingons to negotiate or come to some kind of agreement and maybe stop the war. That's right out of Errand of Mercy.
Right.
So I'll be interested to see, whether they're going to do an interesting twist on that. I mean, obviously, I don't, in terms of the series, they've got another half to go, so they're not going to solve the Klingon war, I think, with this next episode, but I'll be interested in seeing how they play that plot line out.
All right. Well, Jeff Bond, thank you so much for joining us to talk about Star Trek Discovery Episode 8, insert in Latin name here, because I don't actually speak Latin, so I'm not going to try it again. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we say goodbye?
No, I'm looking forward to the next episode, though. It does look spectacular, and again, I'm interested in seeing how they solve this plot, because they as we've discussed, it's somewhat derivative in how this has started off. So I'm very interested to see how they sew it together in part 2.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, man. And beaming in for the very last moment of the show, Sonia Mansfield, is there anything that you would like to say, having not been involved in this segment at all?
I came all the way back here just to say goodbye.
Bye!
Bye-bye.
The Dorking Out Show is on Twitter at Dorking Out Show, where you can find Chris at Jet Jurgens and Sonia at The Sonia Show. You can read about Sonia's random adventures at thesoniashow.com and track the slow and creeping progress of Chris's novel and his other hijinks at jetjurgens.com. You can find out more about The Dorking Out Show at dorkingoutshow.com. While you're over there, you can support us by giving us a review on iTunes.
We have a handy-dandy iTunes link to whisk you right back to 2007, where you can leave your review and 5-star rating in iTunes. We'd do it for your podcast. Want to dork out even more? Well, you can sign up for our newsletter, where you'll get all the headlines we use as fuel for the show. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening.